Hey everyone. So something has been happening in this war that we have to talk about, which has to do with the state of Saudi-U.S. relations. So we're going to go back to May, and I'm building off of a number of articles in this video, but mainly of a New York Times report that is making the rounds. It was published 2 days ago. Something happened, and here's what it talks about. It talks about May. Something happened in May that didn't make too many headlines, but it's one of the most important turning points in the war, one of the most important developments to come out of the war. The Trump administration at the time, you'll remember, launched what they called Project Freedom, which was a mission to escort commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, but it collapsed immediately. It basically didn't happen, and that was because Saudi Arabia refused to let U.S. forces use their airspace. So you have an ally, a purported ally of the United States, or a protectorate of the United States, in the middle of a war, saying no to the president of the United States. So Trump called Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, 3 days in a row. This is all in the New York Times piece. Vance called him, Witkoff called him, Kushner called him. The Saudis held their ground. And I want to walk through what's been going on between Washington and Saudi Arabia, why the Saudis are hedging, what China is doing to take advantage of it, and why, believe it or not, all of this may be making Israel more important to America, not less. So let's set the scene. Iran effectively closes the Strait of Hormuz early in the war. Okay, let's just review the details. 20% of the world's energy passed through that strait. The U.S. tries to organize an escort mission, naval and air power, to protect commercial shipping during the ceasefire. Central Command didn't even consult with the Saudis in advance. And then when the Saudi officials found out, they said American forces could not use their airspace for it. The fear in Saudi Arabia was that letting the U.S. operate from their soil would drag them deeper into the war and make them a bigger target for Iranian retaliation. Quoted in this piece is a guy named Hussein Ibish. He's a scholar from the Arab Gulf States Institute, and he had a great line. He said, America starts a big fight, then gets bored and walks away. It's like Lucy and the football. They're all feeling like Charlie Brown on the ground. It's a great quote. He's describing how a longtime American ally, Saudi Arabia, now sees the U.S. As an unreliable country that keeps setting up the field goal and putting away and pulling it, then pulling the ball away. And this isn't the first time. If you go back to 2019, Iranian drones and missiles attacked Saudi oil facilities at Abu Qaik and Kurais. They knocked out about half of Saudi oil production overnight. Trump did not retaliate. The Saudis were bitter over that. I'm not arguing that Trump should have. I'm just saying this is what happened. So when the current war started, they were already like looking a little sideways at Trump, like, is he going to follow through? And what's remarkable is what happened right after the ceasefire took hold. Iranian missiles had already attacked Saudi Arabian energy installations. They'd attacked the U.S. embassy in Riyadh. Saudi Arabia was getting pummeled by Iran. The Saudis called this an existential threat. They expelled Iran's military attaché. You'd think that that was like, they were totally hardline, want nothing ever to do with the Iranians again, mortal enemy. Instead, on the very morning after the ceasefire, when Iran's foreign minister tried to call all the Gulf states and try to start patching things up, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and the UAE, none of them were willing to talk to the Iranian foreign minister, but the Saudis did. The Saudis were willing to talk to him, and they got the lines of communication open again between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Now, that doesn't mean that the Saudis were abandoning the U.S. position. They're doing what they're actually doing is what they always do. If you followed my channel on what I do in the Israel 365 news channel, please make sure you go over there and check out what we're doing. Good stuff. We've been putting up some good interviews, so check that out. Israel 365 News YouTube channel. There's links in this description of the video. But if you've been actually following my coverage of Saudi Arabia as they come up in the news over the course of the last year or so, I always point out that the Saudis are the ultimate hedgers. They play every side simultaneously. This is what they always do. Okay, this is their game, playing all sides, hedging their bets, making sure that they're sort of allies with everybody. So MBS, the Crown Prince reportedly warned Trump about the risks of this war before it started. And then, according to people briefed by U.S. officials, he later pushed Trump to finish the job and take the regime down, which of course he denies, but that was also reported in the New York Times. And then as the war dragged on, he pivoted again toward pushing for a settlement. So even within this war, he's seemingly changed sides a few times, or hedged. They're always looking which way the wind is blowing. At the same time, Saudi Arabia and the UAE reportedly carried out secret retaliatory strikes against Iran during the war, but MBS was apparently reportedly less enthusiastic about that than the Emiratis. That's not surprising. Analysts who study this closely are now describing it as a kind of doctrine, meaning this hedging. It's not just that they're, wishy-washy or flip-flopping, but this is their doctrine. There's another piece that I drew off for this video from the National Interest. The piece is titled, "The Iran War and Saudi Arabia's Strategy of Self-Reliance." This is from a week ago by Amir Hanjani. Okay, and there you see it. I mean, you see it right there in the headline. Riyadh has long understood that Washington won't protect it. The Iran war has only confirmed the wisdom of its hedging strategy. This is who they are. They hedge. They are the ultimate hedgers. So Amir Hanjani, writing in the National Interest, says that he frames it as Riyadh treating its defense ties with China, because it has defense ties with China, extensive. They buy lots of Chinese equipment, especially in the area of air defenses and ballistic missile technology and equipment. And that doesn't mean they buy missiles. They buy stuff to make missiles. They also have this defense pact with Pakistan, which amounted to nothing because Pakistan did not come to their aid against Iran. But whatever, they have a defense pact with Pakistan. So you see, and they also have the relationship with America, right? So this is Saudi Arabia. These are all pieces of their broader strategy of how they envision self-reliance, that they have their fingers in every pot. Okay, meaning they're, to use the words of Hanjani, they're sustaining their ties with the United States while hedging against the limits of those ties. That's the whole Saudi posture in one line. Keep Washington close enough to matter, but never close enough to depend on entirely. Okay, now here's the part that should be worrisome to America, to Washington. There are some analysts who are arguing that the U.S. created this dynamic, that this whole dynamic with Saudi Arabia is because of America. Now, whether that's true or not is a judgment call, but let me lay it out, what they say. By refusing to give the Saudis a binding security guarantee, by restricting missile sales to the Saudis, as they have, and by tying any Saudi-Israel normalization to a peace process that the Gaza war made politically impossible for the Saudis. Remember, the Saudis have a very fundamentalist, very religious Sunni population that normalizing with Israel, we think of it as like, oh yeah, the Saudis, they could do it if they want to. It's really not so simple with their people. So the Saudis look at this situation where they don't really have a binding security guarantee. There's missiles that are restricted that they can't buy from the U.S. They're always being pressured by America to get into this normalization with Israel, and the Gaza war makes that very difficult. So Washington, through all of this from the Saudi perspective, is pushing Saudi Arabia towards this kind of hedging, towards this self-reliance, including reported movement towards some sort of nuclear program. They're looking for domestic nuclear energy. They've been talking to the Americans about it. So MBS, the leader of Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince, he's trying to have it every way. He wants to support the U.S. publicly. He wants to hedge against Iran. He wants to build out Chinese and Pakistani security relationships, right? That's his insurance policy. And he wants to make sure that Saudi Arabia never ends up on the wrong side if everything goes sideways. So in the background, and this is important, Saudi Arabia has been talking directly to Iran the whole time. Think about that. They've never cut off communication with them. That diplomatic opening goes back to 2023. China brokered a reconciliation agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. I've covered this before. The Saudi foreign minister is in Beijing this week, I should add. Okay, and that was another article that I drew off of for this video. Is this one in the Diplomat? After Iran war, China's Middle East strategy will prioritize the Gulf. China has been kind of joined at the hip with Iran for a long time, and now they're seeing which way the wind is blowing, and they're also seeing that America is kind of waffling. Or not waffling, but America is not so trusted by the Gulf states. The Gulf states are feeling a little bit betrayed and a little bit unsure how much resolve America has. What does America really want here? And are we on our own? And China is looking to capitalize on that and sell all of them on a hedge where they deepen their relationship with China. So the Chinese are capitalizing on the situation as you'd expect them to. And as I said, the Saudi foreign minister is in Beijing this week. We should watch to see if anything comes out of that. We'll be paying attention to that. Meanwhile, the Saudis are negotiating overland routes and Red Sea infrastructure to bypass the Hormuz Strait entirely. They're looking for other ways, more permanent workarounds, because whatever, they don't want to rely on the Hormuz Strait remaining open. Sorry, I had to cough. So this is where it gets interesting geopolitically, right? And that has to do with the whole China thing. So this report in the Diplomat lays out China's calculation clearly. I'm going to dig a little deeper on it now. So Beijing's Middle East strategy, as they're watching this war unfold, has narrowed down to one overriding goal. Excuse me. Boy, a little sneezing and coughing today. They want to keep Saudi Arabia and the UAE from drifting entirely into the American orbit. Now, China has already lost ground with the UAE on that front. The UAE saw American systems intercept hundreds of Iranian missiles and drones aimed at its territory, and they kind of liked what they saw. And so the UAE is much more comfortable with the American orbit. In this piece, it quotes an Emirati official, Anwar Gargash, calling the U.S. the UAE's main security partner, pledging to double down on that relationship. But Saudi Arabia is the tougher nut to crack. So as I said before, China brokered a 2023 Saudi-Iran reconciliation agreement, which makes it the only outside power holding open lines to both Saudi Arabia and Tehran simultaneously. No one else has that type of leverage. No one else has those relationships. And China's not offering Saudi Arabia a military alliance. China doesn't do those really. What it's offering is a hedge, is the diplomatic cover, economic relationships, and also the sense and the optics that Saudi Arabia is not fully in Washington's camp, and therefore that gives them a little bit of leverage with the Americans. So the one framing, one way to put this is that the post-war Middle East increasingly looks like Iran is bound to China, as they always have been. Israel is, of course, aligned fully with Washington, as they always have been. And the Gulf states are now all caught in between. And the Chinese see their whole task as keeping Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which they may or may not be failing at, but keeping Saudi Arabia and the UAE from crossing over to the US side completely. That's what they're trying to do. Now, here's another part that I think a lot of the coverage of this would miss. As Saudi Arabia hedges and drifts, as it looks like flip-flopping, but as they hedging is really the more accurate because it's deliberate. It's not that they're undecided. They're deliberately hedging. So there's an interesting development going on. U.S. Central Command planners are reportedly already discussing moving American bases and military hardware out of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf and into Israel. Now, that might be surprising to you, but let me explain something about the dynamics of the U.S.-Israel relationship. While at the level of the media and the electorate, yes, there are concerns. We're like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of Americans who are turning against Israel, and there's all this anti-Israel sentiment on both the left and the right, yada, yada, yada. But at the level of the defense establishment, the Pentagon, Central Command, they are fully on board with the U.S.-Israel relationship. They know, because they're out there in the field, they're in the intelligence sharing and the defense and security issues, and they know that the only reliable partner they have is Israel. And at that level, it's not even ideological. It's not like Christian Zionism. It is, they get it, that that's their real partner. So Central Command is looking to move American assets out of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf and into Israel. So think about what that means. For 80 years, since Franklin Delano Roosevelt's deal with Ibn Saud in 1944, Saudi Arabia has been the anchor of American positioning in the Middle East. Okay? And that wasn't just about the oil, it's also, meaning militarily also. And that arrangement is now being questioned by people in the military establishment, in Central Command. And in the eyes of the Pentagon strategists, they want to pivot towards Israel. So another piece that I was looking at here is this piece written by Lee Smith. Here, a second, let me get rid of that. So Tablet magazine columnist Lee Smith wrote a piece here, Iran war fallout shifting America's Middle East anchor from Riyadh to Jerusalem, right? And that's what I'm talking about here. So he was writing, so Lee Smith wrote this piece. He didn't write it for Tablet. He wrote it for this outlet here. He argues that Israel has become, in the words of a former U.S. statement that he cites, America's unsinkable aircraft carrier. That's the reputational shift happening right now. The Arab world watched Israel's military campaign against Iran, and they watched it with awe, is the word that Lee Smith uses, not fear, awe. Because listen, you got to remember, these are all, I don't want to use the word wimps, but it's a good word here. The Arab states, they don't want to lift a finger. They're always timid. They're always afraid of an Iranian drone coming after them. And they saw Israel go in there and boom. And they understood what Israel's power is. And for the first time, some Gulf officials are quietly wondering whether normalization with Israel isn't such a bad idea, but maybe it's a strategic necessity, because Israel's not going to waffle. You know exactly what side they're on. They know who Israel is. Forget all the rhetoric about hating the Jews and Islam and all that. They know exactly that Israel has clear interests, will protect them, and that Israel is the most powerful nation in the region. They're seeing it. So, and there's a sharper version of this argument too. There are some analysts who are pointing out how strange the Saudi position is, right? Iran attacks Saudi territory directly, repeatedly, right, during this war. And Israel, in nearly 80 years of existence, has never attacked them. Like everyone thought, oh, Israel, these countries know that Israel's not going to attack them and never has and never will. And yet the Saudis have shown more willingness to accommodate Iran, the country that bombed it, than Israel, the country that hasn't and never will. So if Saudi Arabia were playing pure realpolitik, closer ties with Israel, access to their defense technology, deeper security cooperation would be the obvious move. Instead, it's the opposite. Now, I want to be careful here, because I've said this before and I've gotten burned by events. This isn't the first time that people have declared this, that Saudi-Israel normalization is in the offing. October 7th blew up a deal that was reportedly days away by some accounts. So don't take this as a prediction. Take it as a data point. Unreliability from Riyadh, contrasted against Israel's performance in this war, is pushing American strategic thinking toward Jerusalem, whether or not the politics of the region catch up. There's a warning in all of this too, and I don't want to skip past it. As Israel's profile as America's most important ally grows, so does the target on its back. And there's real concern, and it's laid out well by Lee Smith. There's my grandson, that as the US leans more on Israel militarily, the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about who dragged America into war will get louder. And that's happening both on the left and on the right. Now, the actual reason the US went to war wasn't to do Israel a favor. It was the nuclear program. It was Iran's destabilizing actions in Hormuz that they talked about already in the defense strategy document. And Saudi Arabia wanted it as much as anyone. But look, here's where this leaves us. Saudi Arabia isn't breaking with America, but it doesn't fully trust America. It's hedging towards China, towards Iran, toward its own new infrastructure for overland shipping routes, and maybe even towards its own nuclear program down the road. China is doing everything it can to keep that door open. And Israel isn't just holding its ground, it's becoming the one stable, powerful American ally in the region. So that's the story, what's going on here. Let me know what you think. Sorry, we got interrupted by my family coming in, but that's what happens when the kids are visiting, and thank God for that. It's a great blessing, and thank you for watching. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and do all those good things. All right, God bless you.